In this video, you'll learn about the functions of the skeletal system.
One of the functions of the skeletal system is support. The bones of the skeleton provide a framework for soft tissues of the body to help hold our body up against the force of gravity. Movement is another major function of the skeletal system. The joints, which are known as articulations, can enable movement between the bones, and skeletal muscles that attach to bones through tendons contract to pull on bones, providing the force to enable motion. Protection is another major function of the skeletal system. We see here the example of the cranium protecting the brain. Another example would be the ribs and sternum that protect the lungs and heart, or vertebral bones that protect the spinal cord. Mineral storage is another major function of the skeletal system. Calcium is stored in our bones and can be mobilized from the bone in order to maintain blood calcium concentration. The breakdown of bone is regulated by the endocrine system. The parathyroid gland detects a decrease in blood calcium concentration below the homeostatic set point of 10 milligrams per deciliter. If calcium concentration falls below the set point, the parathyroid gland will produce the hormone, parathyroid hormone, PTH, and parathyroid hormone will stimulate osteoclasts, which are cells in the bone that break down the matrix of bone. They break down the hydroxyapatite and release calcium from bone into the blood. Another function of parathyroid hormone is regulating the activity of the kidneys, where parathyroid hormone stimulates calcium reabsorption in the kidneys, that is, bringing the calcium back into the blood so that it's not lost in the urine. And parathyroid hormone also stimulates the activation of vitamin D in the kidneys. So vitamin D that is first synthesized in the skin becomes activated by multiple steps of hydroxylation that occur in the liver and in the kidney. Final step of activation occurring in the kidney is stimulated by parathyroid hormone, and then vitamin D has a function of stimulating calcium absorption in the small intestine. And so all of these functions work together to increase blood calcium concentration. However, if calcium concentration of the blood is too high, if it is above the homeostatic set point, then the thyroid gland will respond by producing calcitonin. Calcitonin is a hormone that will inhibit the activity of the osteoclasts, but stimulate the activity of cells that store calcium in the bone, the osteoblast cells. And this will also have an effect in the kidney. Calcitonin will decrease the reabsorption of calcium by the kidneys, which means more calcium will be lost in the urine, and this will work to lower blood calcium concentration back to the homeostatic set point. Blood cell production is another major function of the skeletal system. Blood cell production is also known as hemopoiesis or hematopoiesis. This occurs in red bone marrow, where there are stem cells called hematopoietic stem cells that can divide and differentiate into all of the different types of blood cells, the erythrocytes, leukocytes, and thrombocytes. Red bone marrow is found deep within our bones, inside medullary cavities, deep inside of long bones. And there's another type of bone marrow called yellow bone marrow that is mostly adipose tissue that replaces red bone marrow as we grow older. However, in an adult, there's still some red bone marrow found in the proximal end of long bones like the femur and the humerus. So here we can see a photo of the head of the femur, a cross section through the head of the femur showing the red bone marrow and an inner core of yellow bone marrow that's within the proximal end of the femur, the head of the femur, where the joint with the hip is formed. Other places that red bone marrow occur in adult are within the ribs and sternum, in the crest of the ilium. The crest of the ilium is the superior part where if you put your hands on your hips, they're resting on the crest of the ilium. And then the bodies of the vertebrae. The bodies of the vertebrae are the part of the vertebral bones that's most anterior